So the Spa circuit just renewed their contract with F1 to host the Belgian Grand Prix until 2031. But from 2027 onwards, we'll only see a race there every other year. That means we'll only see a Spa race in 5 of the next 7 years, with 2028 and 2030 being off years for the circuit. Now, in this video, we're going to look at the reasons why this decision's been taken, as well as looking at which tracks Spa could rotate with and what it means for other fan favourite circuits. But first, let's start with the reaction to the news, which has been overwhelmingly negative, but that shouldn't be a big surprise. Spa is not only an absolute fan favourite, but it's also been on the calendar for 68 of the 74 years that the Formula 1 World Championship has existed. That's beaten only by Monaco and Monza, which has been on the calendar for 73 of the 74 years. So any move to reduce the number of races held at Spa was always going to be incredibly unpopular, and the reaction won't come as a surprise to the people that made the deal. So why did they do it? We need to follow the money. So the Spa circuit is owned by the local Walloon government, which is a bit like a state in Belgium. As they're state-owned, they've been able to sustain losses to run the F1 race because of the economic benefits it brings to Belgium. According to the Walloon Economy Minister, Willy Borsus, the losses over the last few years have been €3.2 million, €5.6 million and €7.3 million respectively. So no small change, but according to a Deloitte study, the Belgian Grand Prix brings in something like €42 million for Wallonia and €55 million for Belgium as a whole. But despite that, governments can only fund non-essential events like this for so long before people start to question it. Now, the Spa ticket prices range from €265 to €815 for a weekend ticket, which by my calculation, with their 380,000 total attendance, should bring in something like €65 million. So why the losses? Well, by far the biggest cost to host an F1 race is the hosting fee paid directly to F1. These range from $55 million to $25 million across the world, and Spa until recently have been paying the lowest at $25 million. But that's still almost half of their ticket revenue, despite the far from cheap tickets. Unfortunately though, as is always the case with big corporations, F1 has been asking for more, which is why the Spa circuit has only had short contract extensions over the last few years. They simply couldn't afford the big money it would take to guarantee the Belgian Grand Prix for years to come. That is, until now. Reportedly, they've agreed to up the hosting fee to $32 million, but have accepted a concession of a couple of years off in order to secure the long-term future of the race. Now, F1 demanding both an increased fee and only a semi-permanent place on the calendar might seem unreasonable, but when you consider countries like Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan and Qatar are paying $55 million per year, you can see why they were asking for more. After all, F1 can put a place on the map and can have direct positive financial impacts on the area too. All the circuit has to do is sustain a loss. So now you can see how we ended up here, but should it be all about the money? F1 is a weird mixture of sport and business, but it does seem this deal was made with far more thought to business than to sport. But that's a conversation for another day. On to the rotational aspect of it then, and I'm actually a big fan of rotating calendars. I think it makes each year more unique and allows F1 a bigger variety of circuits without going to an even more insane number of races per year than we've got now. Imagine a rotating agreement with the Nürburgring and Hockenheim, or Miami and Las Vegas, or even amongst countries like Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Or better still, imagine being able to bring brand new tracks to the circuit. Would you swap a race in Austria for a race at Turkey every other year? How about a race at Japan for a race in Malaysia? Imagine if F1 raced at 48 tracks every 2 years without having to increase the length of the calendar. I think we can all agree that the prospect of that is pretty exciting. But unfortunately, F1 is still a business, so it was inevitable that we would have to start off with some of the races with lower hosting fees, which tend to be the classic circuits. Moreover, what we don't want is for all the classics to have to rotate while the big money races get a slot every year. I think this is where F1 can bring more of the sports side into it and less of the business side. I think people would be much happier to see the Qatar Grand Prix introduced, for example, if it rotates with the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, especially if it means circuits like Silverstone, Spa and Brazil get a slot every year. But anyway, we are where we are, so which circuits could Spa rotate with in its off years? Well, I think the fan choice would be Zandvoort in the Netherlands. The fan base there is already huge thanks to Max Verstappen, and the two circuits are less than a race distance apart. But in reality, I think we all know this is unlikely, at least for now. The reason F1 would have given Spa a discount on the hosting fee is because they will be eyeing up a much higher paying circuit to balance out the averages. So could we be looking at another race in Saudi Arabia? I'm not sure the financial viability, but a really nice middle ground could be Kyalami in South Africa. If they could get the money together, I think people would be fairly happy with that rotation, even if Spa still wouldn't be fans' first choice of a circuit to drop. The biggest thing we need to be talking about though is where does this leave us for the future? I sincerely hope that we aren't going to start seeing all the classic tracks become rotational while the big money tracks keep their yearly slot. Unfortunately though, it does feel like this move is the first step down that road. I think for F1 to not be seen as money over everything, the next track they need to move to rotational needs to be a lesser light circuit, just to show that they do care about the sport. And I'll never say it in public because it puts them in a weak negotiating position, but I'd love to see certain legendary circuits protected. The circuits with a rich history, passionate crowd, and the best on-track action. Spa has already fallen under the axe, but let's protect circuits like Silverstone, Suzuka, and Interlagos from befalling the same fate. Thanks for watching guys, do drop a sub if you enjoyed this video. 2025 sees a new real-life F1 focus for this channel, so I'd really appreciate your support if you do like this new direction. Thanks for watching, bye bye.